1990 year, in the winter 1500 to 1916, history records an event and for which until now it was not known, that an entire army of the region, parliament, government, people, state administration, that an entire state both placed itself and the entire movement into exile. It was a march across the snowy Albanian mountains, along the malarial Albanian coast, all the way to the Greek island Corfu, and from there back across the Thessaloniki front, here to the homeland. This is a story about the retreat of the Serbian army of the people and the entire state administration across Albania and the resurrection of the dying Serbian state on the island Corfu. But before that, a few words about what preceded these events and how the First World War broke out. In the spring of 1914, Europe still reigned in peace, but between the great powers existed antagonisms of dangerous proportions. Not just about colonies, but also about who would gain influence in the countries of the Eastern Balkans, from which the Turks had departed. Everything smelled of a war of world proportions. Belgrade, after two Balkan wars, had breathed a sigh of peace. In the spring of 1914, down there on the Sava River, was the Serbian-Austro-Hungarian border. All this that we now see, the Belgrade fortress on the other side, of the Sava and Danube, was Austro-Hungarian territory. That Austro-Hungarian Empire had been planning for quite some time to remove Serbia from the scene, for it to disappear as an independent state, as it had become an obstacle to all its interests in the region. Ever since the annexation crisis, it had been threatening Serbia with war, only awaiting the opportune moment. Young Bosnia, a secret organization, resolved to fight for the liberation of Bosnia-Herzegovina from Austro-Hungarian occupation. All Austro-Hungarian occupations 28.000 to 1914 carried out in Sarajevo an assassination attempt on the Austro-Hungarian heir Ferdinand, an assassination that became famous for the fact that it was used as a pretext for a great world bloodshed. Austria-Hungary immediately accused Serbia of standing behind the assassination and launched a world campaign to discredit Serbia. The Austro-Hungarian press wrote, with enthusiasm, "We are going to war." German Undersecretary of State von Heuss declared, "Serbia must not stand." An advisor to the Vienna General Staff, in a pub, "Long live war, down with Serbia." This just-in holy war represents the voice of God speaking through the thunder of cannons. Having thus prepared its something in the world public, Austria-Hungary on July 23 sent an ultimatum to Serbia, in which it set such demands that deeply encroached upon its sovereignty. A monitor tried to bring a voice of reason, writing the murder of Ferdinand and the impending murder of a state. This is the most terrible document ever one independent state sent to another independent state. The English Minister of Foreign Affairs Edward Grey declared, "Has it honorably passed? I am coming for the Austro-Hungarian envoy. You delivered our delayed in the ultimatum." I arrived 20 minutes before 6 o'clock, where the deadline for the reply was, "Envoy Gisel von Gieslingen." Gisel was very displeased. He was shaking from excitement. "I hope," I said, that the imperial and royal government will be satisfied with our reply. Please, let's wait for their reply. Envoy Giesel said he had exact instructions from the government, and that he would compare the note further, whether it corresponded to the instructions or not. He had it written what we needed to write. He had it. Therefore I did not want to wait for the comparison, and he offered me to sit down, I said, until the reply is brought to the ministry. And she already knew how it would be? To sit. They said, when will it go? But the text arrived at the ministry, that what Envoy Giesel said, with an announcement and that the note did not correspond to the instructions, that it was not sufficiently satisfactory, and that relations between Austria-Hungary and Serbia were immediately broken off. They already left Belgrade. So fast. Oh, he ran so that you wouldn't stop him. He already had his travel documents. Rather, personal belongings, in suitcases, were packed and standing in the hallway, in front of the door. And the embassy's belongings were already in the train, which was departing for Zemun. If I had known that, you would not have even delivered the reply to the ultimatum. She knew. That's why they didn't even inform us. The whole world was waiting for our reply to the ultimatum. If we want the world to be on our side, we had to speak. Here, I received a reply from the Russian Tsar to my pleas to take an interest in Serbia's fate. There is still hope that the bloodshed will stop. And all our efforts are in that direction. If, contrary to our sincerest wishes, we fail in that, Your Majesty can be assured that Russia will in no case remain indifferent to the fate of Serbia. The great and merciful Russian Tsar. Your Majesty, it is addressed to you. To Serbia, Your Majesty? Read it. It will pain you to see it. The royal government of Serbia has not in a sufficiently satisfactory manner replied to the note dated 23.1914, which was presented by the Austro-Hungarian envoy in Belgrade. Therefore, the imperial and royal government finds itself forced to rely on the force of arms to preserve its interests. And Austria-Hungary considers itself, from this moment on, to be at war with Serbia. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Count Berchtold. The Austro-Hungarian offensive on Serbia began on August 16, 1914, early in the morning. The Imperial and Royal Fifth Army crossed the Drina River towards Loznica. French journalist Henri Barby describes that moment thus: the war that Austria-Hungary declared on Serbia came as a surprise to the whole world, as unexpectedly as earthquakes, fires, and other great catastrophes. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, the world at first probably didn't believe that a world war had begun. The German command did not expect the main attack across the Drina. This surprise facilitated the breakthrough and advancement into Serbian territory. The decisive battle, in which General Stipa Stepanović commanded, was fought from August 12 to 24, 1914, on the slopes of Mount Cer, after which this famous battle was named. The Battle of Cer is significant not only because its brilliant victory enabled the expulsion of the last Austro-Hungarian soldier across the Drina by August 27. It is also the first victory of the Allied forces in this war, which visibly eased their operations on other fronts. Undeterred by the heavy defeat and great losses in its first campaign in Serbia, the Vienna court already on November 8 sent an unprecedented war machine across the Drina again. The Austro-Hungarian army penetrated with ease like a merciless punitive expedition, burning villages, destroying vital assets, leaving behind countless gallows from which innocent men and women hung. Swiss criminologist Dr. Archibald Rice came to investigate the crimes and inform the world public about them. The Serbian army fought desperately in retreat. At a crucial moment, from Thessaloniki, 20,000 French grenades arrived, with the inscription on the crates, "Don't save ammunition." The enemy made a brief halt in operations. General Mizik used this to rest his exhausted army for a daring counteroffensive. On December 3, at 7 o'clock, the decisive battle began, remembered forever, as the Battle of Kalabara, in which the Serbian army utterly defeated the Austro-Hungarian army and expelled it from its territory. The Battle of Kalabara is inscribed in the history of wars as a brilliant example that an army, after such a long retreat, launched a counteroffensive and achieved an unprecedented victory. Great credit belongs to the main strategist of the battle, the commander of the First Army, General Zvijan Mizik. The Entente powers saw that the Serbian army was a serious ally. This victory had a great echo in the world press. The London Observer, an extraordinary victory, all friends of freedom, are now filled with hope and triumph. The New York Times had printed obituaries for Serbia. Admiration is enough, astonishment is enough for the small Serbian nation, which crushed the army of a powerful empire to dust and ashes. Lord Kitchener, Minister of War, the delicate maneuvers at Cer and Kalabara, led with discernment and freedom of spirit and strength, combining the mastery of the Serbian command, deserve to take a prominent place in our strategic studies. President of the French Republic Poincaré to Regent Alexander, I have received the good news of the victory won by the brave Serbian army over the common enemy. Russian Tsar Nicholas II, with a heart full of joy, I congratulate your Royal Highness on this great success. In 1915, Serbia entered, crowned with a wreath of glory, but also with a tragic wreath of martyrdom due to the great suffering in 1914. Villages and towns were destroyed, vital facilities annihilated, countless wounded were left untended. Captured Austro-Hungarian soldiers brought spotted typhus, which overloaded hospitals. From the initial enthusiastic praise for the Serbian army, it increasingly turned into an appeal to help the Serbian people. Health missions from dozens of countries arrived in Serbia. The well-known American journalist John Reed described the horrific scenes of dying in Serbia, which he called the land of death. Typhus claimed 100,000 human lives. Your Royal Highness, stop. Don't get out of the car. Excuse me?
Jesam.
That
Malo.
is an order.
Zato su i rekli ti idi
What kind of
i
order?
zaustavi njegovo veličanstvo.
From the
gospodin vrhovni
hospital
komandant.
commander.
Čekajte, ko ste vi u stvari?
I am a
Zovu me
senior
Engleskinja.
officer myself.
A ja sam Irkinja.
I am
Iz
the supreme
dobrovoljačke
commander.
ženske jedinice Britanskog kraljevstva.
I know, but you
Iz
cannot
Flora
go
Sands.
further,
Vi ste bolničarka Flora Sands,
especially
koja je u
not
Kragujevcu
the
nedostatku
supreme
hirurga počela sama da
commander.
operiše.
Quarantine
Jesam, ali
begins
su mi
here.
zarobljeni austrijski hirurgi
Infection
malo
from
pokazali
spotted
kako se to
typhus.
Malo.
Tell me what you
Prijavit ću vas
wanted?
Crvenom krstu.
Aren't
Šta
you a
možem?
bit rude?
Ljudski život je važniji od
Yes,
sve
a
drugo.
little.
Bili ste se
That's
vratili u
why they
Englesku.
told me
Kad
to
je došao
go,
mir, otišla sam da skupim
and to
medicinska
stop
pomoć za
your
Srbiju.
royal highness.
I nešto sam skupila.
Mr. Supreme
Kako
Commander,
nešto? Nije nešto.
who are you
110
really?
tona materijala i silna medicinska
They
oprema.
call me an
Zbog toga sam i
English
došao da vam
woman,
se zahvalim, ali ne znam kako.
and I am Irish.
Plemenitost vaših ljudi u
From the
najtežoj
volunteer
situaciji.
women's unit
mene
of the
najveća
British
zahvalnost.
Kingdom.
A velika mi je čast
Miss
da ste vi
Flora
lično vaši.
Sandys. You, Nurse Flora
Rado bih
Sandys,
se rukovala
due to
s
the
vama,
lack of
vaše
surgeons,
visočanstvo, ali
started
bila sam u
operating
dodiru sa
yourself.
tihusarima.
Yes, my
Hvala
dear,
vam na svemu,
the
Mrs.
Austrian
Uvek
surgeons
ću
were
žaliti što
captured.
se nisam rukovala s vama.
Did they show you a little how it's done?
Nemačka i
A
Austro-Ugarska
little.
su želele da izbegnu otvaranje
Did
fronta
you
na
report
Balkanu.
it to the Red
Zato nude
Cross?
Srbiji sklapanje separativnog
What can
mira.
we do?
U svojoj istoriji
Human life is
Srbija
more
se
important
više
than
puta našla
everything
u istoj
else.
dilemi. Da li
Have
prihvatiti
you
rat sa
returned
mnogostruko
to England?
jačim neprijateljem,
When
koji
it
po svakoj
happened,
ozbiljnoj
I went to
proceni
collect
vodi u
medical
korist
aid for
i
Serbia,
užasne pogibije,
and
ili
I
pronaći neki
collected
drugi izlaz?
something.
Bez obzira na očajnu
something?
situaciju u kojoj se nalazila u
Not something.
1915. godini,
110 tons of
odbija ponudu
material and
i
powerful
prihvata
medical
rat sa
equipment.
Nemačkom i Austro-Ugarskom.
That's why I've come to thank you, my dear. I don't know how.
Heroji
Lemony, that is the salvation of our people in the most
koja je dala
difficult
svetu dokaze
situation.
visokih ratničkih vrlina
For
i
me,
najvećih
the greatest
vojničkih
gratitude.
sposobnosti.
And
Samo
it
će
is a
potpun
great
prezir
honor
prema
that
smrti
you have personally
omogućiti da
come.
pobedite taj herojski narod
I would have
i da
gladly
osvojite
shaken
njegovu
hands
zemlju.
with your royal highness.
5. oktobra
I
armije,
was in
koja broji više od
contact
pola
with
miliona
typhus
ljudi,
sufferers.
kojim komanduje nemački maršal Mackensen,
Thank you for
napadaju
everything,
Srbiju na
miss.
frontu širine 1200
I will
km.
always regret not having shaken hands with you. Germany and Austria-Hungary wish to avoid opening a front in the Balkans.
Malo kasnije,
Therefore, they offer Serbia the conclusion of a separate peace. In its history, Serbia has found itself in the same dilemma many times. Whether to accept war with a many times stronger enemy, which, according to every serious assessment, leads to defeat and terrible casualties, or find some other way out. Regardless of the desperate situation in which it found itself in 1915, Serbia rejects the offer and accepts war with Germany and Austria-Hungary. The German Kaiser warns his soldiers, "Heroes, I am sending you to war against a small, but very brave nation that has given the world proof of high wartime virtues and the greatest military capabilities. Only complete contempt for death will enable you to defeat that heroic nation and conquer its land." On October 5th, armies numbering more than 500,000 people, commanded by German Field Marshal Mackensen, attacked Serbia on a front 1,200 kilometers wide. On September 6th, Germany and Austria-Hungary sign an agreement with Bulgaria. A little later, Bulgaria will attack Serbia from behind, which will be fatal for Serbia. The Serbian army retreats southward before the overwhelming enemy, avoiding encirclement and annihilation. Endless columns of the army drag along muddy roads behind the army, a mighty mass of civilians and state coffers. Lady Reed, Lady Robinson, thank you for being in this situation? Thank you, Lady President, for having received us in such a situation. Thank you, Lady Reed. Can our desperate state be described? I know you tried to do that in your Metropolitan magazine. Since talk about Serbia began, I can almost only describe it as an obituary. From the first field planted with crosses, the graves of typhus sufferers. From the hospital near Seeger Hill, the famous monument, where the present and past deliria of history terribly meet. Have you seen the destroyed settlements? We passed Gusevo, the graveyard, the battlefield. We walked over the dead. Yes, we walked over the dead, that our feet sank into pits of rotten flesh and crushed bones. Have you come to know Serbia? Yes, I have written about Serbia as a democratic nation and this army which does not instill belief that the camaraderie of officers with soldiers destroys discipline. I illustrated that in Ser, where one colonel, for lieutenants, one corporal and two privates sit at one table. And why didn't you accept a separate peace with Austria-Hungary and Germany? Or, didn't you hear about it? They offer you all of Bosnia-Herzegovina, the entire military border in Slavonia, Banija, Lika, Kordun, and a large part of Dalmatia. Mr. President, the offer is acceptable. If we were to accept Germany's offer for a separate peace, and they win, they would take from us not only what they offered us, but also our statehood, because their aim is that the state of Serbia ceases to exist forever. The victory of the Allies is our only hope, and for that reason, we must believe in it. To all offers for peace, we have only one answer. Vladimir Bisic made a powerful film for oxen pulling a cannon on a gun carriage. New York Times and French L'Illustration immediately bought the rights to publish the picture. And the writer Edmond Rostand dedicated to it his poem, The End of Peter's Four Oxen. The entire mass descended on Kosovo. The army manages to avoid encirclement, but the military state leadership found itself in a dilemma of what to do next. In order to avoid the most dangerous crisis, the Serbian army begins its retreat. Capitulation is categorically rejected because it would mean the end of the state. And the proposal to carry out a counterattack is not adequate to the correlation of forces. Accordingly, the state leadership decides and opts for the most difficult solution. It makes the decision to carry out a retreat across Albania to the Adriatic coast, where the Allies would meet them and help them recover, and then the recovered Serbian army would join the Allied forces on the Salonika front. The Serbian government to the Allies. Serbia, although it found itself in a difficult position, although it can find itself in an even worse position, is resolved to go to the end in the fight against the invaders, loyally and faithfully to all allies to endure the war, which will end with the defeat of the enemy. November 1915. After the fateful decision, the entire government with Prime Minister Pašić and King Petar went to church. Upon returning from church, Pašić was surrounded by a mass of frightened people, asking what would happen to them and expecting a reassuring word. People, do not. It will not be good. To consider the entire problem. On November 23, a commission for provisioning was formed in Durrës, a commission for provisioning, composed of military and naval attaches from France, Britain, Russia, Italy, and the military attaché of Serbia. It was agreed that bases would be established, bases in Shkodër and Durrës, and from there, allied supplies would begin to be directed, supplies of food and other necessities. The Serbian government reaches an agreement with the president of the Albanian government, Esad Pasha, a great friend of Serbia, who sides with the Allies regarding the passage of the Serbian army through Albania. On November 26, 15, from Prizren, via Vezirov Most, towards Shkodër and Lajë, the first group sets off, consisting of the government, the royal court and the diplomatic corps. On the 30th, from Prizren, via Kula, Pak, Elbasan and Tirana, the second group sets off, and from Pak, 3 armies set off, the main body of the army. The German military command informs the world public. Since the Serbian army no longer exists, apart from wretched remnants, who have scattered into the Albanian mountains, where they will find death, all further operations are ceased and no more communiques will be issued from the Balkan theater of war. A long, endless column stretches endlessly towards the Albanian border. In rows of various army units, companies, battalions, batteries and squadrons, there are also long convoys with horse and ox carts. There were also vehicles crammed with goods and overloaded with people, women and children. There were the government and the royal court, national deputies, state administration, diplomatic corps, foreign war correspondents, foreign missions, actors, singers, gendarmes, prisoners, and freed convicts. Almost an entire small nation. King Petar Karađorđević buries the crown and other insignia in Dekanai and sets off into exile. An entire state and a refugee column crossed the Albanian border in the winter that had already begun. Comedian Branislav Nušić, on the Albanian border, bids farewell to his homeland. We are not bidding farewell to a deceased. We are bidding farewell to something that will live, which must live and which will, with longing and pain, await for me to return to its embrace. Homeland is not an object bounded by borders. Homeland is thought and faith, and thought and faith do not die. Farewell, our blood-soaked homeland, and know that your exiled children greet you. The Golgotha March, whose horrors are laconically summarized in the famous couplet, "No one knows what severe suffering is until they cross Albania on foot." There, everyone had to manage and go to the right side. If a horse stumbled, the leader would immediately let it go, so as not to fall into the abyss himself. In that gorge, in one narrow pass, we saw a carriage and some men carrying a coffin. In front of them walked the old Metropolitan Dimitrie. Who was that being carried? It was the relics of the Holy King, Stefan I crowned, the first Serbian king. They carried him from the Pek Patriarchate under escort. Further on, the tearful river Drim. Vezirov Most, which is mentioned in all recollections as a dangerous obstacle, no longer exists. Submerged. The old stone bridge is perilously frozen, and people who expose their lives to danger while crossing this large, glass-like slippery bridge Many tie a rag to their shoes so as not to slip. I felt reborn, as if I found myself on the other side. Here the army also had to shed its burden. Only food was carried, which included some blankets. Along the road, everything that was not essential for an individual was discarded. Artillerymen part with heavy hearts from their weapon, with which they've been fighting since 1912. The personnel of one battery, silently, was burying their 4 cannons. When the hole for the last weapon was dug, the commander and behind him 2 other officers approached and kissed the worn barrel. After them, one after another, the soldiers also kissed the barrel, wiping away tears that had burned their hearts, and they too set off onto the bridge. In the narrow space between dead rocks and a familiar river, the liquidation of one state is taking place. Again, a mythical scene. Soldiers made special stretchers with an enclosed cabin, and in it, across the Albanian mountain peaks, they carried the famous Vojvod Putnik, old and sick. Yesterday we saw the frozen dead, who had succumbed to 3 snowfalls. The howling wind is determined to finish off in these gorges the remainder of the unfortunate Serbian people. On both sides of the trodden path, refugees are resting motionless and asleep. Their heads have fallen onto their chests. Blizzards blow white snow into their faces. Mountain winds sing funeral songs. The poet and unsurpassed translator Radlija, Stanislav Vinover, one of the young intellectuals from the unit, called the 1300 Corporals, writes down his memories in a poem. Our Serbia is full of freedom. It was breathed, it permeated villages and towns on mountain slopes, by rivers and streams. They carried it with them, not incidental things, into exile, into ruin, to breathe it a little more, as long as they could, to rejoice in it and to die with it. And from time to time, someone would cry out for it. That old men, women, and children would wail for all to hear, as in some great graveyard, because true sorrow cannot exist without people. And now at the funeral, not just one village and its neighbors, now in this enormous graveyard is all of Serbia, before whom a song is sung. The view of Albania terrified us with its white, icy blanket. It was necessary to cross heights over 1,800 meters, a misery never to be forgotten. A French journalist also, who passed through Albania with the Serbs, recorded, "No picture depicting the defeat of the French and Russians does not give even a similar image as this one, which represents the retreat of the Serbs. The entire people, old men, women, children, are moving under heavy snow. At one point, the path encounters an obstacle, the corpse of an old man. He is moved off the road, abandoned. Here is one poor old man with a piece of tent on his shoulders. He shows me his frozen feet and says something, but I did not understand him. I offered him a biscuit, but that was not what he wanted. His hand, with great difficulty, was raised and with his finger showed me what he wanted. And then I understood. He wanted me to finish him off with one revolver bullet. Step by step, we walked one after another. Who surrendered? Who knew? Who will know? You don't know the faces of soldiers of all callings, peasants, workers, families. Everyone minds their own and only their own concerns, which is just for today and for tomorrow. Let there be health. Esad Pasha appealed to his tribes for compassion. On December 3, 1915, he issued an order concerning the acceptance of Serbian money. Listen, Albanians, Turks. Whoever tries to dispute the value of the dinar will be bitten where no one is ever bitten. But Esad Pasha did not secure his authority throughout the whole land, so even his friendly detachment could not guarantee the Serbian army and people a safe passage through Albania. Besides exhaustion, freezing and hunger, there were attacks by bandits and outlaws. They took many lives. The Albanians met us with gunfire. As soon as one of ours stepped out, he was killed or wounded. There, 26 officers and about 70 soldiers died. We did not count them. Our people died near Ispri. On a plateau lay an artillery captain, a woman, a young girl, and a boy, all dead. And next to them sits a living little girl, no more than 3 years old. We took the child with us. From how many different angles this epic is seen? The French dramatist Pierre Loti, the scenes of this Serbian Golgotha, compares with mythical scenes from Shakespeare's plays. And he says, in this sublime and tragic setting, two men are making their way with difficulty, supporting themselves with long staffs. One of them is an old man with hair and long mustaches, just as white as the snow blanket that surrounded him. His appearance in this great, sacred wilderness inevitably reminds of some Shakespearean tragedy. Is that King Lear? Is that Richard III? No, that is the Serbian King Peter, defeated, himself with his adjutant, yielded little by little under the pressure of the greedy victor, leaving behind his devastation in the kingdom. There is nothing more tragic than such a shadow, this plight, and what majesty! But also there is nothing greater than the king's hope that from these desolate mountains his people await a future, a bright and salvific future, which will redeem his apprenticeship and reward his faith. King Peter also walks through Albania. He passes through history, through its peaks. How are you, Duke? How can I be in this movement, so immobile and frail? I break even when they put me in the stretcher. I break even when they pull me out of it, that they might straighten me with their efforts. Your Majesty, does my stretcher not look like an upright coffin? Only a little wider and with windows. I see. How are my people? For God's sake. Duke, what is this, my jests? It is easy for a traveler to be a traveler. When we carry him, that is the people. You're joking. The people? In jest and in earnest. I came to ask about hope. There is hope. We found our king again. What did you find there? Our king. Your Majesty. We found the parchment charter, with your word for the king, with the signatures of all national deputies. For that charter, it is not with a state deed. It was thrown at the end of Bistrica, near the Pek Patriarchate, together with other old documents. Luckily, we found his initials, Duke, and life. I was happy when in this snow, I find some bush, under which I sit down. The wind cradles me in the bush, and so I fall asleep. Wrapped in my greatcoat, and I don't feel the snow falling. How blessed is sleep after such a journey. I often slept while walking. I walk with open eyes and hear the rhythm of people's steps, and even under a horse, I would fall asleep. Only not to snore on the way. Those who snore remain frozen. At the moment of freezing they feel only immeasurable happiness. We encamped to spend the night in Gravatra. Suddenly, shots rang out, surrounded by Albanians with rifles at the ready. The commander ordered us to stand still. Then he went to give them his word of honor, Besa, that we would not touch anything in the village. The Albanians first consulted. Then they also gave their Besa, that no one would touch us that night. A huge funeral procession of the Serbian state troops carried this. I am certain that the upcoming efforts and suffering we will not be able to endure. We do not fear death, reconciled with fate. Only the uncertainty is dreadful, whether I will freeze to death, or I will die of hunger. On one such path I met the gusle player Peranovic, an unseen sight, an ancient drama. He sat among the Serbian soldiers and with his gusle sang heroic songs. He encouraged the soldiers and refugees to endure on the arduous path. Is Nikola sleeping, who sits and looks at the fire? There he sits among 10 people, but I am here. And I don't know, maybe I am not a good man. Come, sit, so I am not so alone. Is he able, good man? Is he still that old king? Old king, he is very old, in the column. How old is he? Is this old man the only one? The old one. King Peter. And you yourself are waiting for King Peter. He must be some relative of yours since you worry so much. And will he save us after all this suffering? He is old. And for that, it's enough for his son to command. This suffering he deserved. This? No, no Serb deserved this, but every Serb is a king. That's why there is no living king, for him to suffer. Oh, to know who he is. I would try to carry him on my back. And it wouldn't be hard, you know. Where are you from, soldier, when you speak like that and pour out such bile? We were with Franja, and then to Serbia. And only after we crossed the Dina, I defected to the Serbian side. And what will you do now, soldier, and what are we retreating from now? We are retreating, starving and dying. We will suffer, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. And Christ suffered, so you too suffer. Is it like that? Not what is in my soul, if I speak. God has not abandoned us yet, no. You think so. To tell you the truth, then I rejoice in that. In my soul there is not even a little cold. Serb, you are right. I tell you. And in the end there will be, on our side, victory, you will see. If we don't freeze until then, we will not die of hunger. Listen, old man. Well, you are just a complaining old man. You are a troublemaker. You just make the cold worse. Now it's clear to me why you sit alone by this fire. You are a grouch. A grouch you are. So why did you chase all these people to the fire? You are the only one here. You dare to say one sits by the fire. His is convenient for us. What are you stirring up with that loudmouth? Who are the unrepentant, and I wonder why I am barking with this grouch here? Place him among the penitents. Your unholiness. Lie down in a tailor-made place. Settle down in bed. I will rest you. So why is it impure? Know nothing I. Thank you for convincing me that God of Serbs has not yet forgotten. In the colony there were more than 1,000 of various ages. French Inspector of Education, Jules Poirier, was moved by their fate and drama. He later recorded. Many recounted, even in times of greatest hardship, they tried to record their impressions. They speak, how cold it was for them, how hungry they were. Seeing me, a small one alone, a soldier came to me, offered a string of small fish. Take this string of small fish and guard it well. Every day eat only one small fish. Then drink water or eat snow. Because the small fish is salty. That will be enough for you. You won't endure. We traveled from the 4th of October until the 17th of January. For months we walked through snow, we just break through boundaries. Once I slept in a house, where I paid 10 dinars. All other time I slept on the bare ground. On snow. We slept in the snow, where the freezing wind blows, in the cold of at least 25. We rubbed our faces with snow with fear, that we wouldn't freeze, that we wouldn't remain dead there, that we wouldn't become prey to wolves. From Kosum Rija to Skadar, we saw such places of horrors, that I dare not even remember them. Not to mention the path on which were sown corpses of unfortunate soldiers, but we saw people dead from cold, from exhaustion, and from hunger, in immeasurable cold and despair. Serbian column of starving soldiers in Kastrati, Skadar Center, Kastrati Albanians, mostly Catholics. In a beautiful Catholic church the priest holds a sermon to his flock. Brothers Albanians, God got angry at a peaceful, brave, and noble people, and brought to our land, to seek protection and hospitality. Is there a harder death than to look at bread and die of hunger? Any people would savagely attack from hunger our bread without any regard. The only people who gave such an example in history, that he preferred to die rather than touch foreign property, is the Serbian people. Such honorable people, that it serves for neighbors to envy him. I call upon you, in the name of Jesus Christ, to fulfill your Christian duty. Oh Jesus, Jesus, poor Serbian people. Elder Saban immediately rushed with cornbread to the church, to the military station, to feed with their bread the tired, starving Serbian army. Lake Skadar and the city of Skadar on its shores.
On to odbija.
Not far from the goal of this great campaign, the shores of the Adriatic Sea. In mid-December, Serbian forces gathered near Skadar with the intention to reach the coast near Moldova and the vicinity of Elbasan, orienting themselves towards the port of Durrës. For the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces, French Marshal Joffre described this campaign thus: "The Serbian army at the end of November and beginning of December 1915 began its march towards the Adriatic coast, a march for which it can truly be said that it was truly a martyrdom, and for its motives and historical consequences great." Under such conditions, it was inevitable that in the wake of the columns countless victims would fall of those faithful sons of the homeland who had the will, but not enough strength to fully endure all the suffering and hardships that with horrors exceeded everything that history has recorded until now. Serbian envoy at the Serbian court August Bop crossed Albania and found himself among Serbs who were gathering in Skadar. He notes that exhausted soldiers entered Skadar like true corpses. They walked with difficulty, thin and exhausted, gloom on their dark faces with extinguished gazes. No complaint was heard from the lips of these people who had suffered so much, as if some evil pursued them and what they silently, only occasionally uttered bred. Around Skadar and Durrës there were over 185,000 starving, exhausted people. For the fifth time, the government saw that all signs, they did not provide the promised bases and reception stations, so they bought food on the coast, thus providing 1,950,000,000 half rations. Here, a Serbian peasant soldier saw the sea for the first time. He would approach, scoop with his hand, and taste the water, then conclude, "It is really salty." With the arrival on the Adriatic coast, the suffering of the army and people continues. From the promised Allied aid they found nothing. The Allies had sent significant quantities of food to the Italian port of Brindisi. The first ship with which the Italians transported food to the Albanian coast was sunk by an Austro-Hungarian submarine, so they decided to stop further transport. The small Albanian port of Shëngjin, or San Giovanni di Medjugorje, or as they christened it in their accounts, San Giovanni di Negua. Here, continuous streams of people arrive and gather, masses of soldiers and civilians. They come here to vegetate in vain hope that they will see rescue ships. Instead, they find a desolate shore and a sea from which Allied ships lie, sunk by bombs of Austrian aviation which now haunts Serbian exiles. The Allies offer Regent Alexander to come for treatment in Brindisi. He refuses. He undergoes a delicate operation on the spot, continuously appealing for aid for the dying Serbian army and people. The disagreement among the Allies and their persistence regarding individual interests led the Serbian army to the danger of completely disappearing on the Albanian coast. In the Allied press, opinions already appeared that it was completely illusory to help people who were already dead. The situation begins to change only with the energetic intervention of whom? If the Serbian army is not immediately rescued from Albania, Russia will break the alliance with the Entente and conclude a separate peace with Germany. Read the ultimatum of the Russian Tsar. The French government understands the Russian Tsar. On December 26, it makes the decision for the Serbian army to be transferred to Bizerta. Embarkation in Shinjin on January 4 and 26, 1916. The first 12,000 fighters, mainly the most health endangered, were transported to this Tunisian port. The Serbian government opposed the army being taken so far from the homeland. The decision followed for the remainder of the army and people to be transferred to the Greek island of Corfu. For this purpose, a detachment of French Alpine chasseurs from Bizerta landed on that island and occupied it. Due to the threat to Medjugorje from Austro-Hungarian forces and because of the Kotar troops had to move south, and the Italians would not embark Serbs, justifying it with fear of infection. They only embarked captured Austro-Hungarian soldiers whom the Serbs had brought with them. The exhausted, starved Serbian army was forced to march another 200 kilometers. Another march began along the Albanian coast, another Golgotha for the Serbian army. And even that path, its slopes were marked by numerous corpses. This is a martyr's march, in which people sank into malarial swamps of the Albanian coast, dying from exhaustion, hunger, and various diseases. Only crossing the Shkumbin River 1,000 drowned. And then the Italians stopped the march towards Vlora, allegedly due to infection. In vain, British doctors claimed that these were diseases of people exhausted by marching in hunger. For 10 days, even the hungry at home where the landing stages were full of food. The greatest drama struck the younger groups, who had set off from fear. Only after the decisive intervention of the French did the Italians clear the way to Vlora. We continued, but about 400 did not come with us. Of the groups that had perished where they were meant to wait. Moving slowly, silently, towards Vlora, only the earth swallowed human flesh and remains. Here we are in the Albanian port of Durrës. From here, at the end of January, the evacuation of the army and civilians began. And there, further south in the port of Vlora, embarkation on Allied ships began. From Durrës, the First and Third Armies were embarked. Via Vlora, the troops from the new territories, the Timok army and the Belgrade defense were evacuated. The Italians this time distinguished themselves by providing the most ships. But great recognition must be given to the French, who took on the enormous effort of organizing the transport, in whose hands it became efficient. They organized the evacuation in such a way, look at up to 9,000 people. And the Russian diplomat Prince Grigory Nikolaevich Trubetskoy embarked with the Serbian army onto ships to Corfu. He described that event like this. And then it clearly presented to me all the unusualness of this journey. We were leaving Albania. Far behind us we were leaving Serbia. Here were ministers, generals, commanders of armies, representatives of states. It was the beginning of the deliverance of a whole nation, which never stopped believing that its lucky star would return it to the promised land. I felt like a witness of a great historical drama, one of its most tragic acts. I sat next to Pazik. He was lost in thought. For a moment he looked back at everything that had passed and said, "We have lost everything. but we have saved Serbia's honor. That was a great undertaking of the Allied naval forces. The Allied transport fleet numbered 45 Italian ships, 25 French, 11 British flagged and 6 Italian and French hospital ships. In the direct escort of the convoy 70 warships participated, including destroyers, torpedo boats, and patrol boats, then around 100 minesweepers and submarine hunters. Protecting the transport of refugees, the Allies fought naval battles. Ships of the Otranto barrage dragged fishing nets, equipped with anti-submarine mines, patrolled between Vlora and Corfu. In that operation, the Allies lost 8 transport and 10 warships. Of those, 1 cruiser and 2 destroyers, 3 submarines, 6 minesweepers, and patrol boats. Trying to thwart that operation in 26 submarine attacks and 25 air attacks, and the Austro-Hungarian forces lost 2 destroyers and 5 submarines. Not a single transport ship with Serbian troops was sunk, all arrived at their destination unharmed. Milutin Bajic thus poetically summarized that moment. A whole nation found itself on the wide open sea, on galleys at sea, and set off to seek shelter for its weary body, and that under the warm sun of Corfu, Algeria or France, seek healing, faith and hope. The last echelon of the Serbian army left Durrës on February 16. So the French government considered the operation finished, and withdrew its transport ships to Thessaloniki. The great effort and sacrifices of the powers of the Entente around this undertaking were made not only for moral considerations towards the Allied Serbian army, which in previous battles had put out of action tens of thousands of enemy soldiers. The intentions of the Allies were identical to the strong desire of the Serbian army to recover as soon as possible and return to the front in the decisive battles of this war. The island of Corfu, one of the most beautiful Mediterranean islands. For Greeks, the name Kerkyra, Corfu got its name from the beautiful nymph Kerkyra, wife of the god Poseidon. Here once, after a shipwreck, the waves cast out Odysseus and his sailors. Beautiful Nausicaa found him exhausted in a deep sleep, and led him to the court of King Alcinous. Here Odysseus recovered, got a ship, and sailed to Ithaca. When Serbs disembarked here, 100,000 inhabitants lived on the island, and in the city of Corfu itself, 30,000. It was as if the Corfuites were astonished when onto their island this mass of people in rags disembarked, significantly more numerous than themselves. One Greek citizen, Peter, compared him to Odysseus. Him they, after wandering through Albania with his army and people, the waves of misfortune cast onto this island to find salvation there. Guvia, a small port near the city of Corfu, this monument says that it is the port that received all the ships with refugees. On January 6, 1916, here the first Allied ship docked with Serbs. This is how all the refugees looked when they arrived in Corfu. Those who still had some strength and health felt that the end had come to their cruel sufferings, freezing and hunger. Some blessing poured down on us as well. Just so nothing spoils it to the end, a mild climate awaited them, olives, lemons and oranges, food, drink. As if they had arrived on the island of salvation, as if they had come from hell to paradise. By February 21st, here had disembarked more than 150,000 people. From there we went to Govino. There were tents, around them olives and oranges, piles of bread. White bread was distributed, to be eaten. Good French food and Italian wine in canteens, which was given to every soldier. Suddenly, too strong food into starved stomachs, and insufficient supervision, drove many starved ones to death. Here on the small island Lazaret, there was a reception station, through which the majority, officers and soldiers, had to pass to cleanse themselves of vermin and of stench. After undergoing disinfecting, formalin bathing and dusting, those who were infected with infectious diseases would remain on Lazaret. Most foreign medical missions together with the Serbian army went through the Albanian Golgotha even though it was not asked of them. The Corfu Medical Corps was composed of doctors and medical staff from Serbia, Great Britain, Russia, the United States of America, France, Switzerland, Japan, Greece, Italy, and other countries. There were many critically endangered, especially among poor, young recruits, and most were among those who had walked the path between Durrës and Vlora. There were people among them who did not weigh more than 27 kilograms. For them, Corfu, a place of salvation, was the peak of suffering. They were sent to the island of Vido. Vido, a small island not far from Corfu, the island of Vido, a sign of the peak of Serbian Golgothas, it looked like to us. Once it was a desolate, rocky, island of snakes, which the Corfians called it. Here, on the 21st, the Moravian hospital disembarked, with its entire personnel and staff. To it were added the Kakak and Pirat military hospitals, with an urgent task, to establish a healing place there, in which the epidemic would be stopped. From the pier, one had to go uphill, to reach the place chosen for the hospital. So on this high ground in the middle of the island, medical centers were set up. The first field hospitals were set up by the French. They built a settlement, with up to 500 patient beds. Ordinary tents brought from English ships were supported by oars from French ships, and that represented something resembling tents. The tents were pressed down by stones, so the wind would not carry them away. One could pass through the tent only by skipping over corpses and over those still alive. That collective exhaustion was such that the pulling out of the dead was always accompanied by a wail, by trampling and injuries to patients, by orderlies. All deaths were not a minor difficulty for the given Kursu. The life force that lurked was exhausted to the extreme limits. And it represented what is called an ordinary life, skin and bones. It was about weeks for them. There in that hell, gathered at the focal point, in miniature, the entire tragedy of our country was played out. Therein the pre-death groaning and delirium trembled, quivered, all the most delicate and painful fibers, what a man already was. New patients were constantly arriving, whom they carried unconscious, who died there immediately, on stretchers, in the hands of orderlies. Right next to the tents is a place, where they brought and piled them up, that those dead were piled up. In the beginning, they were buried in shallow stone graves on the island's shore. There the first 1,200 victims were buried. But soon it was simply no longer possible to bury in new stone soil.
Zaustavljen je pomor na
On the uphill slope they began to pass each other, stretchers, which carried the sick uphill, with stretchers, which carried bare human corpses to the pier below. On the shore, piles of human bodies were seen piled one on top of another, like meter-long logs in several layers. Until the grave, the question will tear my soul apart, if everything really had to be like that and if it had to be paid so dearly. These are scenes hitherto unknown in the experience of the human race. Bodies were carried away by boat to the French ships St. Francis of Assisi or Notre Dame, which were anchored a little further. They took them further and laid them in the blue depths and into that shared sea. We are approaching that unique tomb of Serbian youth, that holy place of pilgrimage called the Blue Tomb. It is presumed that here, into the blue depths, about 6,000 martyrs were lowered. The Blue Tomb was, with restrained pathos, sung by Milutin Bajic in the eponymous poem. Stop, imperial galleys, restrain your mighty sterns, tread with quiet pace. I hold a proud requiem in the time of nocturnal dread over this sacred water. There at the bottom, where shells are numerous, grasps, and on dead algae, peaty sediment falls, lies the graveyard of the brave, lies brother next to brother, Prometheus of inadequacy, apostles of misery. Don't you feel how the sea crawls, not to disturb the eternal peace of the fallen host from the deep chasm? Peaceful slumber slumbers, with a weary flight, the air wanders with me. Stand, imperial galleys, before the slaves, my brothers, sound your trumpets, guards, in a solemn requiem, sing. There, where ballads kill. For I want an endless silence to reign, and that the howls of battle are silenced, like hot springs, they scold the frothing, among children who cheer, under withered words. Therefore, I want to serve a requiem in silence, without words, without tears, and soft sighs, that the soft steps crush the dust of the path, into a muffled rumble of distant drums. Stand, imperial galleys, filled with conscious respect, glide with a quiet tread, holding the requiem, as if the sky has not yet seen, above this world, this water. By the end of February, a halt to the plague was in sight. And early and warm spring arrived. But the Serbian government was on foreign territory without money. We are not without money, gentlemen, announced an official from the Ministry of Finance, Milan Stojadinovic. We have significant funds in foreign banks. What good is that to us, they ask. It's good. I have a large number of current accounts. In half an hour, the money can be here. They started to distribute salaries, it was spent, they wanted more advances, fees, which made the locals happy. Serbs opened shops on all sides. Cash registers filled, Durek shops, Savap shops, kitchens, cooking, drinking and eating with all their might. So much so that even the Greeks were astonished, amazed. Various sabapi were grilled, lambs were slaughtered, wine was drunk. The Greeks watched and wondered how much they lived in their own land. There were also the Allies. They really liked Serbian cuisine, and they adopted almost all of it. The allies and organs of the Serbian state urgently solved the question of supplies. Stock and provisions arrived from various sides. The Allies even brought 5,000 oxen and dry provisions. Old Duke Putnik visited his army before he went to Nice for treatment, or he would soon pass away. When the last refugee arrived here, Regent Alexander arrived on the last ship to the island. French and Serbian detachments lined up paid him tribute. I saw an old colonel wiping his tears. The regent buying cigarettes before visiting the hospital. Mr. Supreme Commander, soldier of the 2nd Regiment, 1st Army, Corporal Flora Sandys. Reporting for duty. Instead of you, Sergeant Sandys, for a long time there was a female supervisor in a hospital in Sabak. You saved me. I got typhus. I was lucky to be alive. So, tell us what you did afterwards. I went to England, but I returned in November. Oh, in November. For God's sake, Miss Sandys, at the very peak of our suffering. Why would I abandon my Serbs and not go with them to Albania? The 1st Army accepted me as its soldier, and here I am. So how did you endure the difficult days of the hunger march through Albania? Well, with great sympathy from your and foreign soldiers. Those dear soldiers gave me a mare, Diana. They looked after me like a born sister. Only they carried me in their arms. I heard about your bravery, Miss Flora. I heard about your skill as a marksman in battle at Cox. I heard about your violin, which has a soul, from which you did not part. For everything you have done, I award you the Order of Saint Sava, an Order of our honor. Thank you, Your Highness. The Serbian state began to function on this territory. Throughout the city, signs were hung on buildings. Railway Directorate, Chief of the Kosjeric District, Belgrade National Theater. Here is the administration of the Topsider Penitentiary, Kragujevac District Court. Telephones were installed and all that could be heard was, "Hello, hello." District Command. Do you hear me? Hello? This is the school inspector from Kakak. Please provide as soon as possible the requested office supplies. The authorities brought their own things with them, and now they are settling in. The economist of Jagodina District, Tunis. The commissioner of Topsider Police, Paris, and so on. The building of the Corfu Theater was where the Serbian parliament sat. Heated and loud debates were held there, as Serbian parliamentarians do, in peace. It should be mentioned that the controversial Corfu Declaration was signed there, which envisioned that the southern Slavs would unite in a common state. For Croats and Slovenes, that was the first step on a recorded path to reach its independent state. What were at the front Dostaljer and at the end of the century? For Serbapak, it was the beginning for meddling into one delusion, into an adventure from which they still haven't exited. The army's reorganization was carried out according to a plan, which was made by French cooperation with our specialists. New uniforms and completely new French weaponry arrived. Villages were seen as those where the Serbian army initiates parting with old rifles, with which they fought 3 wars and received new French rifles. To heroically use that heroic Serbian rifle, here is your rifle, with which they will liberate their homeland, said the commander. Camps are being arranged with holy beds and paths, and from them a song is heard more and more often, and by itself the wheel. Further instruments were bloodied for the new military music. Stora our number on friendly built Korfiats. Many initiating officers, and even future government Pricenics, married Korfiat women. Allied and officers were amazed by the discipline of all dry Nika and about easily terrible conditions. Not a single theft. Nika what damage was not done to the locals. Many armies came here, said the Korfiats, and meaningful they wanted to permanently remain here. And you long to return to your homes, you look across the sea and sing your Tamo Daliko. Thousands of children set off with the Serbian army through Albania, and many of them found themselves on Corfu. The Ministry for Prosperity, whose head was, took care of them Ljuba Davidovic. 4,000 children. The French government accepted them, and they found refuge in families throughout France. 10,000 citizens in Marseille, Rouen, Nice and other cities came out into the streets to welcome the small Serbs. On behalf of the royal government, Ljuba Davidovic sent a letter of gratitude to the French government and addressed 4,000 French families. Following the noble traditions of your great homeland, you participated in a unique part of my history, and I have the honor, on behalf of the government of the Kingdom of Serbia, to express sincere gratitude of the parents, who, knowing that their children are protected, will bear their cross of suffering with more hope. The ministry took care of numerous young men and students, who went to school, to France, to Great Britain, to Greece, Switzerland, Italy, Russia. Many of them later returned to Serbia and repaid their debt to the homeland. Before the last boat returned from France, the poet Vladislav Petkovic wrote, "When we return to our hearts, if our children are still alive, they will simply ask, 'Where is France?' Instead of an answer, we will place a hand on our heart and we will tell them, 'Here, France is here,' and our children will understand that." The English formed hospitals in the city of Corfu, which helped and took care of the endangered little ones. For children who were not sent to France and Corsica, on Corfu was formed an elementary school and a gymnasium. Military priests performed mass religious ceremonies. Easter was celebrated especially solemnly. Kanatsky priest Dr. Bajet Belgizi, Regent Alexander, stood before the army and exclaimed, "Christ is risen, brothers." And the whole army loudly replied, "He is truly risen." A unique sight. One leader, like some apostle, publicly declared to the army that Christ is risen, and the army I will accuse to say its viewer. The Church of St. Nicholas, one of 3 churches that the Corfiat Metropolitanate offered to Serbs for worship. After all worship, they sang Tamo Daliko. A very lively social life developed, and a theater was working. Especially popular was Brana Svetkovic's cabaret. Songs of longing for the homeland were sung, and the song Tamo Daliko was learned by both French and Greeks. The Serbian printing house started working, and significant books were printed. And never in such a small space were there so many significant Serbs. There were Regent Alexander, Putnik, Stipa, Misisaj, Bojovic, and Urisisaj Storm. There was Pašić with his ministers and all party leaders. There were Dusisaj, Nuzisaj, Bojisi, Dragisa Basic, Vinaver, Slobodan Jovanović, Todor Manojlović, Rastko Petrović, Nikola and Veli Mirković, Branislav Petronijević, and many other prominent Serbs. There were created Ave Serbia, Blue Tomb and other works in Masisku creative work. There is also the Miroslav Gospel, which they cherish as the apple of their eye. After working, the Serbian army eagerly awaited the day for the Salonika Front movement and returned to the enslaved homeland. Pantelidze Petlovaca, good. From Gornja Petlovaca, Sister Margarita. Pantelidze Gornja Petlovaca, good. Good. You say that it must be good. Have you understood, Pantelidze? Good. You understood everything. And you understood everything till the end. And that you have bid farewell to everyone. It must be that God, for all of us, appointed you to console thus. God's mercy. And only He could choose you to console and comfort me thus. God's mercy works miracles. You will soon get up. You have a brother and sister. I already said that. And I know that you proved it. And I must ask you again, we must talk about what you understand. You have relatives there in that France. I already said that. Go, you, briefly. You will soon be in that France. You will be in that France. So what is that dream to you? As if Serbia hurts him, and you comfort me. And what is it like in that France? As if it's Serbia, I would. That's what the road has offered you. You know how it is. If those are your olive trees there, those are our plum trees. And this sea of yours, for us it's meadows and fields. So the shallow part is meadows, and the deeper part is plains. And this island of yours. And you must go yourself to see that for us. To go to Patliđans. You must show me your orchard that you loved. And you show me the old grandfather's mulberry tree. And under the mulberry tree, there is Otis, there is mother, there is the brother you brought back and saved. And with strict Dragagila, who never even married. How do you know all this? Sister Margarita. And who are you to us? And Otis and your mother say. And who is this Pantelidze? And you are silent. And Sister Dragagila says this must be some good soul, who was good, you know, Pantelidze, in that foreign world. And he came here to show what our living Serbia is like. Go, show. And how it is the hardest wish for me not to just fly over. The Korfiats, through the stories of their ancestors, preserved the memory of the Serbs' stay on their island.
Srbi će zauvek ostati vezani
And
za
after
krv.
90 years, the people of this island cherished it. Many preserved stories will tell you. In order for that feeling to be permanently preserved, they donated their house, which they called the Serbian House. And still, when they were there, by the initiative of the Dina Division, they erected this monument in Agio Mateos. On the monument are the verses of their poet, junior officer, Vlade Stanimović. On the hills, in that foreign land, a Serbian candle will not flicker, till our people and children, my kin will never arrive. Greet the homeland, fallen, killed for Serbian soil. Let these hills be a monument of struggle for freedom. Peasant Ioannis Ioannoulis donated. When he moved the bones from that ossuary, he no longer cultivated it. Serbs then erected a monument to him in his Agios Mateos. Everyone still says that the arrival of our people to Vito Island and here, into the ossuary of martyrs, evokes strong awakenings and even tears among Serbian officers. Metropolitan Mitrić said that the island of Vito should become a Serbian Jerusalem for future generations. Here rest my grandfather's comrades in arms, soldiers of the Serbian army, born in Nikolic. Glory to them and thanks. The moment of departure for the Salonika front has arrived. Despite the hardest hardships and troubles, the soldiers did not stop believing that that hour would come. Serbian soldiers cheered joyfully, because the departure to Salonika meant the beginning of the return to the homeland. Kobe said that these were those soldiers who were naked, barefoot, hungry, thirsty, half-dead, arrived in Corfu, and just recently, it was said that the Serbian army no longer exists. From there, therefore, they began boarding the Allied ships. Parting with the Corfiots could not pass without sighs from both sides. May God bless good Serbia, so that you return as soon as possible to your homes and to those who await you so eagerly. The island of Corfu is a part of Serbian history. Serbs, for these remains, are tied to Corfu, to this beautiful island and its benevolent people. In April 1916, here, in the Salonika port, Allied ships began to arrive loaded with soldiers of the renewed Serbian divisions. French soldiers who happened to be here welcomed them with shouts of "Long live Serbia!" From here, the Serbian army departed for the Salonika front, where the forces of the Allied countries were already located: French, British, Greek, Italian, and Russian. From here, French ships transported wounded Serbs for treatment. And so the song continued. A French ship is setting sail from the harbor of Thessaloniki. Zeitnlik, Thessaloniki, a memorial cemetery for Allied and Serbian soldiers who perished on the Salonika front. Another large ossuary of Serbian soldiers. And here rest 4,000 English, 400 Russian, 2,000 Italian, 8,000 French, and 8,000 Serbian soldiers, a total of 21,400. It is known that in 1916 to 1917, there was a great stalemate on all fronts, and on the Salonika front, the Allies hesitated for a long time to launch a breakthrough. They had problems with the Serbs who impatiently waited to charge toward their homeland. But the Salonika front is not the subject of our story. We will only mention that at one point the Serbian army broke loose and began a glorious, unstoppable, and historically unprecedented breakthrough. July 14, 1918. A 24-hour bombardment of the enemy began, with 180 shells per minute. Clemenceau had previously telegraphed his delegation, "You are authorized to begin the action when you deem it appropriate." The next day, Serbs in French create a breakthrough 14 kilometers wide. The French stopped 2 days later, but no one stops the Serbs until ultimate victory. The Bulgarians, who had been told that the Serbs had died in the Albanian mountains, shouted, "Flee, the living, here come the dead." Then they threw down their weapons and fled in disorder. The Serbs penetrate irresistibly, ignoring that their flanks are unprotected, because the Allies remained in their starting positions. They no longer count on them and do not listen to their rear. They have already advanced 50 kilometers. In 2 days, they crossed the Vardar, by which the Salonika front was broken. The German command ordered a general retreat. Military historian Peter Kirch, the Serbian breakthrough was the first to break the German front. Thus, this secondary battlefield gained crucial significance for the overall outcome of the war. On September 29, Bulgaria capitulates. An army of 700,000 soldiers was knocked out of action. Bulgarian soldiers joyfully go into captivity. Tsar Wilhelm is furious with them. The loss of 62,000 Serbs decided the outcome of the war. The English acknowledged their mistake. David Lloyd George, of all the secondary fronts, the one on the Salonika front proved to be the most important. There, a mortal blow was delivered to the Central Powers. In vain do the Allies warn Mizik not to act so carelessly. Mizik's soldiers march for 18 hours without a break. The French cavalry catches up with them in 2 days. Finally, they rush into their homeland, advancing from Kumanovo to Niš, 160 kilometers in 6 days. It was the greatest and fastest advance of the Allies, says Gustav Freit. General Bojovic deftly ignores orders to stop before Belgrade. His vanguard triumphantly enters the Serbian capital, after pursuing the enemy for 45 days over 600 kilometers. Thus, the circle of this great suffering was closed. Thus, the exhausted Serbs realized their dream, to reclaim their land, to return to their homes. And the price? The price is truly too high, devastating. With 26% losses, Serbia is far ahead of all participants in this war. Precious moments of peace in Belgrade. And in the Second World War, remaining loyal to the Allies, Serbs, by percentage of victims, remained at the very top worldwide. Many surrounding nations, who were on the enemy's side in both wars, are better situated in Europe today. Mestrovic's sculpture, The Victor, stands today on the Belgrade fortress, trying to awaken forgotten glory. In the 20th century, Serbs convincingly proved that they know how to die. At the beginning of the 21st century, hope arises that the value of life in this new space will increase. Then Serbs will prove that they also know how to live.